Masechet Eruvin, we're on Sadi Gimel 93. We have 4 sections to the daf tonight, but they all have one thing in common, which is cases and variants of a big yard adjacent to a small courtyard. Okay, so we'll see all 4 parts. We're starting off with a question that we was from yesterday's daf, which is, would adding a partition ever add a prohibition? Generally, if you have another wall, that sounds like it should be better. That should be an increase, not a decrease. So Abaye says no, you can never have such a thing. I'll show you where he said that yesterday. Right? Can we ever have that adding a partition would cause a prohibition? So Abaye's assumption is no. However, he's going to be challenged. We had one challenge yesterday from the big and small courtyard, and that was a case that looked kind of like this. If I have what was a big courtyard attached to a small courtyard, and then that means the big courtyard I'm allowed to carry because it has these edges. Well, if I add walls on the side and I add another wall here, then by adding walls, now the big courtyard is no longer any bigger than the small courtyard. And so now by adding walls, I made it prohibited from carrying in the big courtyard. So you see, isn't that a good example of adding walls? And yet that causes a prohibition. That was the question to Abaye yesterday. And he answered and said, no, I know you're adding walls, but it's a trick. Because really what you're doing is taking away these partial walls, which I needed in order for this to be an enclosure. So you're adding walls is really taking away walls. Okay, that was the question we saw yesterday, and so now we're going to continue with 3 more challenges from a portico sukkah, from a half roof, and from mixed seeds. Okay, so let's see these 3 cases, and then we'll come back to the outline. Okay, the first one, Amar le'Rava le'Abaye, it's his colleague, says, really, you can't find any case that a added partition causes a prohibition? Here's a case. והאיתמר סיכך על גבי אכסדרה שיש עליה פסימין כשרה ואילו השווה פסימיה פסולה. So if you put schach on top of a portico and the portico has doorposts, then that's fine. Pictures will explain it here better. Portico is generally something that has a covering but has no walls. In this case, it has some walls. There's 2 walls because it's adjacent to a house. And also has these pitzimin that are sticking out, these kind of doorposts. And so if you have this setup, that's perfectly fine. You have a kosher sukkah because you have 1, 2 full walls, and then the doorpost here and the doorpost here makes this a kind of an opening, an enclosure. And so that's fine also. So this is kosher. Now, what if I add walls and I add from the edge of the doorpost to this edge of the doorpost, as in this picture? So what happened here? I added walls, and now by adding walls, I actually have a problem because now that I don't have a doorpost anymore. The sukkah starts here, and it's completely open, right? I can't use the this edge anymore because there's a full wall. The wall only begins here. So here you go. See, by adding a wall, I caused a prohibition. I took the sukkah, which was a kosher sukkah, and now made it a bad sukkah. So isn't that a good example against Abaye? Amar Abaye ledidi keshera, ledidach siluk mechitzot hi. Abaye says, actually, I have no problem with this because Abaye holds of the principle that pi tikra yored v'sotem, that I can use the edge of a roof and consider it as if it comes down. Then when we see a shape like this, the roof can be considered like the beginning of a partition that we imagine pulls down. So actually, Abaye says, I'm totally fine with this case. According to you, however, even according to you who say that you don't have that principle, that the roof is considered to come down, still, this is the case of actually you're removing mechitzot. I had mechitzot where here, and then it's true, you're adding more material, but by adding more material, you're actually taking this part just away from the sukkah altogether. So you were really removing, not adding, although technically adding, it's not considered halachically adding. Okay, so we got out of that one. Amar le Rav Hanan Abaye. Now, the next challenge. Really? That's what you hold? That you can never have a case where adding partition causes prohibition? Here's one from this Braita. Bayit shechesyo mekora v'chesyo eno mekore. Gefanim kan mutar lizrawa kan. So this is now the next challenge from. Oh, I think I skipped something. Yeah, oh, this is it. Okay. So חצי מקורה גפנים כאן, מותר לזרוע כאן. ואילו השווה את קרויו אסור, אמר להתם סילוק בכיסות הוא. So the case is I have something that has half of a roof. Actually, that picture is right here. Okay, so I have a home that has half of a roof. If it has half of a roof, then I apply the principle that pi tikra yored vesotem, the edge of the roof, we consider it as if it comes down and forms an enclosure, forms a wall. Now, one of the laws regarding mixed seed, kilayim, is that I cannot mix together vines and grain, and I cannot even put them side by side unless either I have a wall in between or I distance 4 amot. So in this case, although there's no physical wall there, because the roof is half of a roof and I apply that the edge comes down, so I have an imaginary wall there. And so you see, that's okay. Now, what if I go and rebuild the rest of the roof, right? I finish it off. So now I'm adding more material. I'm not adding a wall, I'm adding a partition, I'm adding a roof. What happens if I cover the whole thing with a roof? Now I no longer have this imaginary wall. And so here you go. Here's a case where adding more material is going to make this thing that was permitted to plant side by side, now is going to make it prohibited. So that's the question. And the answer is no, that's also, I'm taking away a mechitza. I had, albeit an imaginary mechitza here because of the edge of the roof. Now you took away the edge by filling it in. So you didn't add a partition, you removed a partition, even though it was only an imaginary partition. Okay, so that solves that problem. And now we get to the last one, which is going to be a slightly long, also about kilayim. Shalach le Rava le'Abaye b'yad Rav Shemaya bar Ze'ira. V'lo masinu mechisa le'isur. Really, do not find such a thing? Here he says it in the name of a messenger, which is interesting because Rav and Abaye are often speaking to each other, right? So do they usually meet, or is it usually a messenger? Is this the exception or the rule? I'm not sure. Okay, v'hatanya. Yesh v'mechitzot hakerem lahakel ul hachmir. We have a baraita that says adding a partition in a vineyard can sometimes act to make it more lenient, and so you can plant more, and sometimes it makes it more stringent. Let's see the first case. Kesad. קרם הנטוע עד עיקר מחיצה, זורע מעיקר מחיצה ואילך. שאילו אין שם מחיצה, מרחיק 4 אמות וזורע. וזהו מחיצות הכרם להקל. Okay, if I have vines here and seed and a grain here, so generally I have to leave 4 amot in between, so that they're not separate, so that they're separated. However, if I add a wall in between, then I can plant right up to the wall on this side and on this side. So there you go. Adding a wall allows me to plant 4 more amot. Okay, so that's where adding a wall is lenient. How about the other way where it's more stringent? L'achmir kesad. Haya. משוך מן הכותל 11 אמה, לא יביא זרע לשם. שאלמלא אין מחיסה, מרחיק 4 אמות וזורע, וזוהי מחיסות הכרם להחמיר. Okay, if my vineyard was only 11 or less away from a wall, then I cannot plant grain there. We're going to see the reason is, I'll show you the picture. We're going to see a full Mishnah about it in a second, but I'll show you the picture from now. So if let's say I have, here's my vines, and then I have a wall. In this picture, it's 12, 4, 4, and 4, but let's imagine that it's less, okay, for this baraita. So now I always need 4 away from my vines in order to start planting. Here's the thing though, when I have a wall, I also have to leave a space of 4 from the wall, because people don't want to dig right up to the wall because it makes the wall weaker. And so if you plant things next to a wall and you're going to plow there and dig there, so no one does that. You got to leave 4 for the wall. So therefore, you're leaving 4 here, 4 here, and in the middle, nobody would ever plant less than 4 amot of a strip, because less than 4 amot is not not considerable enough to bother putting plants down there. And so therefore, the minimum that you need from the edge of the vines to the edge of a wall is going to be 12. If you have less than 12, right, 11 or less, then you would be no possibility of planting here at all. And so there you go. Now we have a case. Let's say there was no wall here. If there was no wall here, then all I would need is a 4 amot distance, and then I could plant everywhere I want right after 4. But now by adding a wall, right, and if I add it with an 11, now I cannot plant over here. So there you go. Adding a wall causes a problem. Okay, that is the question to Abaye, and it seems to be a good question. Now Abaye answers with another question. Abaye says, why'd you ask me such a weak question from a Baraita? You should have asked me an even stronger question, because it's the Mishnah that says the very same thing. And question from a Mishnah is stronger than from a Baraita. All right, so now we're going to quote the entire Mishnah. It's basically the same as what we just said, but adding another case and adding Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai. So v'ditnan karachat hakerem, an opening in the middle of a vineyard. Let's say the crops in the middle you didn't plant, or they got destroyed in the middle. How big can that middle section be, and so that you can plant some grain there? Bet Shammai omrim 24 amot, uBet Hillel omrim 16 amah. All right, we'll leave that. We don't need to explain. It's not relevant for us. I mean, you can figure it out, right? If you have a space in the middle, then we have a picture. Okay, right. If you have a space, here's the vines all around, and so you have this large space. So what's the smallest that this large space can be, so that you can plant things in the middle? Well, you need 4 amot a distance from the vines, because you're going to need to bring a horse and cart here, right, to do work. So you always need that. And then in the middle, well, what's the minimum amount to plant in the middle of grain? Well, it's 4 amot, but this here is 8, because 4 for this side and 4 for that side, so 4 on all sides. That's Bet Hillel says 4 and 8 and 4 is 16. Bet Shammai says no, it's got to be 20, because they consider the minimum amount to plant as 8, and so therefore in the middle you need 8 and 8. That's and then the same 4. Well, not 8 and 8. It'll still be 4 and 4 is yeah, right. 4 and 4 is 20 is 12. So you need 12 in between, right? Because you need 12 and 12. So you have that in the middle. There's would be 12, not 8. So he needs more space in the middle. Okay, and so that's Bet Shammai. Bet Shammai says Arba'av amot. Where am I? So 24. I was right before. Okay, it is 24. Because according to Bet Shammai, you need 4, and then you need the minimum is 8 for this side and 8 for that side, and another 4 that adds up to 24. Okay, but Bet Hillel says you only need 4 and 4 and 4 and 4. Then it adds up only to 16. Okay, that's not our case. Here's the case. We need mechol hakerem. Bet Shammai omrim 16 amah, or Bet Hillel omrim shetem 10 amah. Mechol hakerem means a space around. If I have the vines in the middle, how much space do I need around it from the vines to the wall? As we said, we need 4 amot so that I can do work all around, and I need 4 amot from the wall, because no one will plant anything between the wall and right next to the wall. It'll undo the wall. And the minimum amount that anyone would plant is 4. So therefore, you need at least 12. Less than 12, not. So you see, this is the same example, right, as the Braita, that if there was no wall here, I'd actually be better off, because then I could start planting here, and now I cannot. Okay, the Mishnah ends off with just some clarification of definitions. Ezui karachat kedem. What does it mean? The bald part of the kedem, kedem shechadevim saito, that the middle section is bare. Im and sham, like a bald spot. Im and sham shesesema lo yabi zera l'sham. If less than 16, according to Bet Hillel, then you cannot plant there. Hayu sham shesesema noten lo kedei abodato vezorea et hamotar. So if there is 16, then you have to leave 4 amot all around, and the rest of it you can plant. And what does Ezri Mechol Kedem? What does it mean Mechol? As in the perimeter, the circle of the Kedem, Ben Hakedem Lagadeh. That means between the edge of the vineyard and the wall. Sheim and Sham Shetem Esre Amma Lo Yabi Zera LeSham. If there's less than 12, you cannot plant there at all. Imayu Sham Shetem Esre Amma Noten Lo Kede Abodato. If there is 12 or more, then all you have to do is leave 4, so you can do work, and then you could plant the rest. All right, up to 4 away from the wall. Okay, so this is so this was the question on the question. You should ask me from the Mishnah rather than the Braita. Okay, but still, now we have to answer both, because here, if you had no wall, I could start planting my grain 4 away from the vines, and now if I put a wall, now I have to have 11 away from it. Okay, Ela hatam lav hainu tama dechol 4 amot legabe kedem abodat kedem. לגבי גדר, כיוון דלה מזדרען, אף קורם אבקה להו, דבנה ובנה, עיקר בה חשיבן, ועילה לחשיבן. Okay, the answer, I actually explained it to you already, but that is Abaya's answer. He's saying that you're not prohibited because of the wall. The wall's not causing the prohibition, but rather, it's simply that you need to leave space in order that the wall will not become weakened. And so that's the reason. So the adding a partition is not directly adding a prohibition. Okay, so that's what Abaye gets out of this. I mean, in the end, you can, in any case that and adding a wall adds a prohibition, you can always say, oh, but the reason is because of something else, which is what Abaye does every time. So in fact, it's more of like a semantic argument. And there are lots of cases where adding a wall does, in one way or another, increase the prohibition. All right, so that ends that section. And now we're going to have a variant on the big and small courtyard. Is what if we have 3? First, we're going to talk about a case of a big courtyard, then the small one in the middle and big one on the outside. Or where if we have a small one, a big one in the middle, and then another small one. And some variations of that, how many people live in each one. Okay, so let's go right into that. Amar Rav Yehuda. Shalosha karpefot. Okay, these karpefot are kind of enclosures that are temporary. This would be like when people are out and they in a caravan and they stop somewhere and they put up fences that are only horizontal or only vertical. And because these are weak fences, therefore we saw halacha way back towards the beginning of Masechet Eruvin that there only can be so big. If I have just one of them, one person inside, so it can only be up to 2 betse'ah. That's all we allow a person to do. However, if there's 3 or more people there, then we give them more room. If there's 3 or more people in such a temporary enclosure, we give them as much space as they need. If they have a lot of stuff, we give them more space. But it has to be 3 or more to be called a caravan. Okay, so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get 3 people into one enclosure, even though they actually built 3 separate but adjacent enclosures. That's the idea. Okay, with that background, the Amar Rav Yehuda, Shelosha karpefot zo besad, ze besad ze, ushnayim achitzonim megufafim, v'emtzai eno megufaf. So I have 3 enclosures, 1, 2, and 3. The outsides are protrude, and the inside one does not protrude. V'yachid bazeh, v'yachid bazeh. And they have one person living in this one. I should add another yachid bazeh, one in this one and one in this one. There's one in each of the enclosures. So what is the law? Naaseh keshayara v'notnin lehen kol sorkan vaday. That does in fact become as if it's one, and so we consider it one enclosure with 3 people in it, and then therefore they get as much room as they need. Why? Well, from this guy's perspective, this is a big courtyard, and so it has 1, 2, 3 walls plus these partial walls, and let's say this is less than 10, right? So it has has four walls. So this guy can carry. He's okay. And furthermore, because this is less than 10, this thing is actually an entrance or exit for him. So it becomes part of his area. So this guy is allowed to go into here and use this as his foyer. And this guy on the left has the same thing. He has four walls and he can use this as his foyer. And there's one guy who lives here. So therefore, you see that they have a common area. All three can go and use this area. Therefore, this area can be as big as possible, as big as their, not as big as possible, as big as their needs, depending on how much stuff they have. Okay, good. So that's a lenient case. Now, what if it's the opposite? אמצעי מגופף ושניים החיצוניים אינם מגופפים ויחיד בזה ויחיד בזה ויחיד בזה אין נותנים להן אלא בית שש. Okay, well now if we have a small enclosure and then a big one and then a small one here, this picture looks kind of funny, but this is a more natural picture. This was the previous case, big, small, big, and this is the other case where you have small, big, and then small. Oh, well, how do we deal with this case? In this case, the middle guy is big and he has four walls, right? One, two, and then two partial walls. And then this is an exit that he can go out. And there's another exit and he can go out here. The problem is he's only one person and he can only be in one place at a time. And so either he goes out this way, in which case there are two people here, or he goes out this way, in which case there are only two people here. But there is no situation in which there's no space that all three share, that they all three can carry in. And so therefore, in this case, they're separated, and they can each have the two betse'ah maximum rather, but they cannot, no more than that, even if they have a lot of stuff. So there's more limited in this way. Okay. All right, so that is the principle that Rav Yehuda said. And now that's pretty interesting. We're going to add a few more variations to this case. Instead of one person, and one person, what if it's a combination of ones and twos? So let's see. Ibaya lehu. Echad bazeh, ve'echad bazeh, ushnayim ba'emsai mahu. If I have one, two, and one. So does that make it better? Ilehacha nafket elatahu, havu. Seems it would make it better because these people they have an exit, right? This is less than 10. They have an exit. They can go here. If these two people go here, now there are three people here. So so these people, right, should be able to have a caravan, and so they should be able to make it as big as they want, as big as they need. Or they can go to this side, and then there'll be three people here, so they can make it as big as they need. So at the very least, one of these sides should be able to make an enclosure as big as their needs. It says they can go to both, maybe even both. Okay, well, even without that, at least one of them. So do we say that to be lenient? Or maybe they're not going to agree and go together. There's two in the middle. Maybe one will go this way and one will go that way. So then you only have two on this side and two on that side. You don't have three to make a caravan. And so therefore, it would still be prohibited, just like one, and one, two, and one also is a problem because you can't guarantee that you can have three in one place. Okay, so and if you say in that previous one we should be stringent because they can go only one, because they can split up. What if you have this following? If you have two here and then one in the middle and two people on this side, how about that case? This one guy, either he's going to go this way and there'll be three people here, or he's going to go this way and he has three people here, right? Is one of them, he's going to go one way or another, one because he has two exits. And so therefore, at least one of the sides has a caravan and should be as big as their needs. That would be lenient. Or do we say, well, we don't. He might not go here. He might not go there. And so, since we have doubt about where he's going, or if he's going anywhere at all, so therefore we cannot consider either of them to be a caravan, and so that would be also be the same as 1, 1, and 1. All right, so those are all the questions, and you'd expect here to say teko because usually they leave these standing, but in this case we have an answer. Hilchata ba'ayan lekula. The halacha is all these dilemmas we can be lenient because in the laws of eruv, right, in general, we always follow the lenient possibility. All right, good. So all those are good possibilities, and now we finish section number 2 with the big, small, big, and small, big, small. Okay, now the next part is not directly about a big and small courtyard. It's only we're gonna use this as a solution to a problem, but that's why this whole thing is here. The question comes up about regarding a partition. Partition wall has to be 10 tefachim high. Okay, we saw that it can be 10 off the ground, or it can be a ditch that goes underground 10. But what if it's half and half? This is actually quite a practical case. A lot of people build their sukkah, for example, on a porch. And maybe their porch is not very high off the ground, right? Maybe it's only 5 tefachim off the ground. And they have a fence on the porch, but the fence is not very high either, right? It might just be a low fence of like 2 feet. And so the fence around the porch by itself is not a wall, and it's not high enough off the ground. If it was very high off the ground, then the walls of the porch going down could be. But now this is half and half. Is that considered enough of a wall? And so that you could just put schach and you don't need to build walls. So we're going to see that the answer is yes, you can do that. But let's, first of all, there's 2 opinions. Rav Chisda says no, you cannot combine half up and half down. And Medemar says yes, you can combine them. Halacha will be like Medemar. But let's see Rav Chisda first. We're going to challenge him from a baraita, and we're going to have a bit of a discussion about this baraita and different possibilities. And in the end, we're going to resolve the baraita according to Rav Chisda by making it into a case of a big and small courtyard. Okay, so that's why this is relevant. And so let's see the content here. Amar Rav Chisda. Gidud chamisha mechitza chamisha and mistarfin. If I have an embankment that goes down 5, and there's also another wall that goes up only 5 tefachim, they do not combine, and so it's not a wall. Ache kulo or kulo begidud or kulo b'mechitza. Has to be all up or all down. That's Rav Chisda. Now we have a question from a Braita. Metibe. I have 2 courtyards. One is on a higher plane than the other. And in fact, the higher one is higher, 10 tefachim. Or maybe the higher one is only 5 higher than the lower plane, but there's also a wall that's on top. That's 5. In such a case, they have to make 2 separate eruvin, and they cannot join together. However, if the mechitza is less than 10 altogether, or less than 5 plus 5, then there's no wall at all, and therefore they have to make 1 mechitza between the 2, and they cannot be separate. Okay, let's see picture. Okay, so here's Rav Chisda's statement that if I have my floor is here, and then like a porch, 5 below and 5 above, he says does not combine because this is too short from the perspective of the guy here. This would be too short, so it's no good. Okay, the question is from the Baraita that involves 2 courtyards. This one's elevated. A little bit hard to tell from this picture, but right, you can see this one's higher up and this one's lower down. And so if it's 10 higher, of course, right? But even if it's only 5 higher than this one, but there's also a wall, right? Then if I have such a case, then they do combine, and this is its own courtyard, and this is its own courtyard, and we have to make 2 separate eruvin. They cannot combine. So what do you see from this? That you do combine 5 plus 5 equals 10. And so this is a perfect good wall, both for inside and for outside. So this really does go against Rav Chisda. If it's less, then yeah, okay, fine. But according to Rav Chisda, this shouldn't count at all. And according to Rav Chisda, this should not be any mechitza. That should be considered all one. You have to make 1 eruv. All right, so this is a solid question to Rav Chisda. Amar Rav modeh. Okay, in the printed edition, Vilna edition, it says Rav as trying to answer for Rav Chisda. This couldn't possibly be because Rav is a teacher of Rav Chisda. Rav is the first generation of Chisda's second, third generation Amora. So it can't be Rav. In fact, if you look at the earlier printed editions and the manuscript, it says Rava. And the Vilna Shas is a note also. It says it has to be Rava. Maybe they were just shortening it as an abbreviation, but this is a typo. It has to be Rava. Okay. Amar Rava. I wish in this edition they would, in Koran, they would just put Rava, put the correct thing. Was why bother putting the wrong thing in parentheses? All right. Amar Rava. Modeh Rav Chisda batachtona, ho'il v'ro'eh penei asara. Okay, he says that Rav Chisda would agree that from the perspective of the lower courtyard, when he looks at the wall, he sees 10, right? There's 5 and there's 5. So that's 10 altogether. So this should be considered a wall for him. But from the perspective of the one on the upper one, all he sees is the upper 5, right? Because he doesn't see, he's on the ground here. So that's Rav Chisda's compromise. And so you see, therefore, that it would be, in fact, two different courtyards from the perspective of the lower one. So he partially resolved the question, but not fully. Okay, fine. The bottom one guy, because you have 5 and 5, he should make his own eruv. And can't join together. But the guy in the upper one, he cannot make one eruv by himself because he's open to the other side, and he can't make 2 eruvin because he doesn't have a wall, right? He's not enclosed, so he can't make his own eruv because he's not enclosed. He can't join together with the other guy because the other guy has a wall, right? So you have a kind of paradox, right? That this guy, he doesn't have an open, he doesn't have a wall. He can't make his own eruv. He cannot join together with this guy because this guy has a wall and can't join together with him, right? Can only join together if both people can join together. And so this doesn't fit with the language of the Mishnah, of the Baraita, that said if there is 5 and 5, then they each make their own eruv, and this wouldn't be the case here. So we're going to try again. Amar bar Ola, kegon she'ata yonam megufefet ad eser amot. Perhaps it's talking about a case where the upper one has an additional protrusion of that's 10 high, and this whole thing is less than 10 amot. So now let's see. From the perspective of the guy on top, he has a full wall here and an opening, which means that he can go either way. He can make his own eruv because he has enough of a wall, or he can join together because he does have an opening. But from the perspective of the guy in the bottom, he has a full wall, and now it's even bigger here. So he has to make his own eruv. So here's a case where it could be that he makes his own eruv, and he would also make his own eruv. So we're getting a little better. But this still doesn't work out. Because ihachi emasefa, pachot mikan, me'arevin echad, ve'en me'arevin shenayim. If the wall is less than the 5 plus 5, then they have to join together. Right, but why would that be? If this is less than 5, like this picture. Well, let's think of this picture still. If this is less than 5 here, then this guy still has a wall here, and so he doesn't have to join, right? This guy has to join here, but this guy does not have to join here because he has actually, right, because he has an opening. So so the sefa doesn't fit the words. Doesn't fit the words with the sefa. Pachot mikan me'arvin echad. ואין מערבין שניים, איביה אחד תערב, איביה תראה תערב. But the guy on the upper one, he actually doesn't have to join with the lower one. He can make his own eruv because you said you added the gipufeh. You said he has protrusions. So that one doesn't work either. Rather, this is the final thing. Amar Rabba bered Rabba, kegon shenifresa tachtona bimloa la'elyona. Not the final thing. So the upper one is completely breached. The lower one is completely breached into the upper one. In other words, right, the gap in the wall goes the entire length of the small courtyard as follows. So here, what we have, basically, we're saying that we have a small courtyard and a large courtyard, right? And so, therefore, from the perspective of the large courtyard, he has walls, so he can make his own eruv if he wants, or he can join together because this is only a short wall, and so it's open. However, from the perspective of the small one, now this is a smaller wall, right, in the sefa, so he has a full open wall. He only has three walls, and this is totally open. So he cannot make his own eruv. He has to join together with that one. And so that's a little better, but still not quite. Chad ta'areb, tere lo ta'areb. Elyona ibaya, tere ta'areb, ibaya, chad ta'areb. So this language fits with for the lower person, he has to join together. That's what the Braita said. But the other upper guy, he doesn't have to join together. He can make his own because he has the side walls. In Achiname, you're right. He really could. וכי קטני פחות מכאן מערבין אחד ואין מערבין שניים, התחתונה. And when the Braita said in the Sefer that if it's less than 5 plus 5, then they have to make their own eruv and not own eruv, and they can't make two eruvin, it was referring to the lower level that he has to make, that he cannot, he has to join together as one eruv, and he cannot make his own eruv. I was only referring to the bottom, but you're right, that the upper one can. Okay, so in the end, we actually couldn't really find a solution that perfectly fits the language of the Braita. We had to reinterpret the Braita a little bit, but the best option of all is this one with the big courtyard and the small courtyard. All right, and so, okay, so that we conclude, we answered Rav Chisda. Now we're just going to see Meremar's opinion. Darash Meremar, Gidud Hamisha Mechisa Hamisha Mistarfin. He disagrees and thinks that 5 plus 5 does add up to 10, even if it's half up and half down. Ashkeched Rabina, L'Ravacha B'Red Rava. Amar le Taneh Mor Midi B'Mechisa. So this sage found as his colleague. He says, "Have you ever learned anything about a mechisa? Something like this is whether it's allowed or not?" Amar le la. No, I never heard of halacha. So that's actually a good sign because common sense would say that 5 plus 5 can add up to 10. What's the problem? And he never heard otherwise, so that's good. And therefore, halacha l'maaseh, you can add the 5 up and the 5 down to make a total of 10. No matter which side you're on, even if you're on the upper side. In other words, you could look over and you see down. You see, oh look, the floor is 10 lower. That's good enough. All right, and now for our last section, if a partition falls down on Shabbat, and now there's all suddenly more people in your courtyard than you started Shabbat with, what do you do? And we're going to bring a proof from a big and small courtyard. Tashem Amarav, Ba'erav Hoshaya. Diurin Abain B'Shabbat, Mao Sheyasru. Right, we made an eruv before Shabbat. We had 10 people in our eruv. All of a sudden on Shabbat, new people arrive. Well, how could they arrive? For example, if the wall falls down to the next courtyard over, and now we have more people in the courtyard who were not included when Shabbat started. What should be the law? Do we say that since our eruv was good when Shabbat started, it continues to be a good eruv, or now the situation changed, now it undoes our eruv? Amad Rav Chisda, Tashema, Chaser Gedola Shnifresa Leketana, a large courtyard that is breached open to a small courtyard. See, the word breached open sounds like there was a wall between them and now it fell down. Hagedola Muteret Vaketana Asura, the bigger one remains fine because even though the wall fell down, it still has the side walls. So from the perspective of the big one, they have enough walls, and their architecture doesn't change halachically. But the small one, they do change because here they imagine there used to be a wall here, so they had full walls, and this wall falls down. Now they have nothing. No wall there. So now all of a sudden they have new people, right? All the people in the big courtyard are now newcomers into their eruv. And it says asura, that they can no longer carry. So that would seem to be the case, right? And so this would resolve it. and show that, in fact, it would cause a prohibition, even when it falls on Shabbat. But we answer, Rabba Marabba Emar Nifresa. Who told you that the wall fell down on Shabbat, and now all of a sudden there's a new prohibition? Perhaps it's a case where it fell down before Shabbat, and so we started off that way, and maybe it wouldn't matter if it fell down on Shabbat. Amale Abaye, lo temar mor emar, ela vadai mebe'ojam nifresa. Abaye tells Rabbah, says, I not only do I agree with you, but you shouldn't even say emad, maybe, say that it happened, but rather for sure, this Braita is talking about a case where it fell down before Shabbat. And that's the only reason why it's prohibited, because when Shabbat started, there was no wall. But if Shabbat started with a wall and it fell down on Shabbat, you wouldn't have to worry. It doesn't change. Okay. Hu da'amar. You yourself, Rabbi, you're the one that taught us. Ba'ai mineh merav huna u'ba'ai mineh merav Yehuda. Arev derech ha'petach v'nistam ha'petach. Right. I raised this question. You told us that you raised this question before Rav Huna and before Rav Yehuda, and said, let's say I had two courtyards side by side, and there was a window in between. That's enough. A big window, 4x4. That's enough of an opening so that you can join together. And all of a sudden on Shabbat, something fell down and sealed up the window. Or that's an opening. Or a window, same thing. Mahu. So here we had the architecture was okay when Shabbat started, and now it changed on Shabbat. Does that change the status of the Eruv? Shabbat kivan and you're the one that taught us that once if Eruv is good when Shabbat starts, then it doesn't matter if the wall, in this case, seals up. It's still okay. The joint Eruv is still okay, and therefore the same would be the opposite. If you made your own Eruv and the wall fell down on Shabbat, then your Eruv remains the same. And therefore, in this case, you should say for sure that it happened beforehand. If the small courtyard, they made their own Eruv because they had a fourth wall, and then the fourth wall comes down, so that they still retain their Eruv and they can still carry. And so that concludes that this part of it. Tomorrow we'll see more discussion about a partition that comes down on Shabbat. When actually we're going to see it's a machloket between Rav and Shemuel. Baruch Adonai Olam. Amen ve'amen.